Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Star, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. Heart Warriors is a series I've been guided and inspired to do thanks to my energetic connection with Katajuda. Katajuda is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, the sacred feminine site. Now, what I'm here to do is to give a platform to men so they can share their journey into the heart with the other men watching, sharing their experiences, their stories, their healing journey, their highs, their lows, their insights, their wisdom. What did it take for them to become the men they are today that they can now share with other men walking this path? For too long, us women have been trying to tell men how to be men just out of pure frustration because we too were not healed and we didn't know any better. And so part of the reason of this platform is to give that voice now to men, with me just holding the space and remaining neutral. So thank you for being here. Now, today's guest is a man called Matt Helm. Now, Matt is an intimacy and relationship expert. He's a visionary leader. He's also a healer, coach, and speaker. So really looking forward to chatting to Matt and hearing all about his journey into the heart. Enjoy.
Yes.
Hello, Matt Helm. Welcome to Heart Warriors.
Thank you, Gemma. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Where about in the world are you?
Right now, I'm coming to you from Ann Arbor, Michigan in the U.S.
Nice. Love it.
A little bit of a different time frame
Yes.
than you are there in Australia.
What time is it with you?
It's 7 o'clock Eastern time.
At night, yeah, and 10 a.m. A day ahead here. So we're Wednesday. Yeah. We're that's like the time travel, right?
That's right.
Yeah, awesome. Let's get into it, Matt. How would you describe the man here sitting in front of us when you drop all your labels?
I'm someone who makes contact with that question and brings the full reality of who I am and what I am as a being. And so in this moment, I'm a man that lives on the edge of reality. I want to be right in the here and now in the present moment. I am someone who feels like he's finally done the healing work, the waking up, the healing up, the maturing up. And now I'm showing up on the planet in my full power, my full divine power, offering myself completely in my truth. And I am so committed to humanity. I'm so committed to this planet and to giving the gifts of my life, which is something I am so grateful to be living on this planet. And that's such a great question. I am one with all of life, right? I am the divine incarnate moving energy, moving this physical material body on the planet. And I am so in love with what this life thing is, with what taking this breath thing is on the planet. I can't believe we get to have this experience, right? So now I want to give that to our people. I want to build and transition humanity into something new. I want to help us evolve. That's why I've been so attracted to your poetry and your writing. And there's not many that catch my attention, but I'm just so happy to be here with you too, and I want to honor you too for the work on this planet, Gemma. I'm so grateful. I'm a father of 5. So I've got 2 sons, 3 daughters, and 3 of those are my biological children. Two of them are, we call them my gift children. I'm their gift father. And so really seeking to be the best kind of father, conscious father I can be for all of my children. And overall, I'm creating an organization. I've created an organization, Freedom's Edge, which is committed. My earthly service is really, so many women are attracted to my work, kind of holding the masculine for feminine healing. And so that's one of the things that just started happening naturally in terms of how I'm showing up and offering my gifts to the world. And my love and passion is actually working with men and doing the work of healing the masculine wound on this planet, the masculine collective wound on this planet.
Yeah. Oh, this is great, Matt. And we'll get into all this at the end throughout the show. I was going to say, I always open up a bit at the end of the show for you to bring in whatever I haven't touched on. So we'll get to it all. Nothing will be left out. But let's start getting to know a bit more about how you became the man you are today. Let's go back to little Matt in childhood. What was his major challenge that he had to overcome?
My parents were 17 when they had me. So they were in high school when I was a child. And so my father was 17, my mother was 18, and I was born into very young parents who barely knew how to take care of themselves. And all of a sudden they're thrust into being mothers and fathers. And so I think from the very beginning of my life, my challenge was to learn how to navigate that maturity level of my parents. They were still so young, such children themselves. And there was a sense of deprivation there. There's a sense of, I know this now, having really reflected on this type of a question, that the kind of attention and time and presence that a new mother wants to give to their child, that a father in this world doesn't really know much about how to give in that certain way. That's kind of the situation, the context I was born into. And that little guy learned very quickly to survive. So my challenge, having a mother who went back to work as a young woman, then she had my brother when she was 18. And my father was largely absent in this picture. So you can imagine what that's like, a young woman, mother of two children under 2 years old, and a very absent father who was pretty much a substance abuser, alcoholic by the time he was 18 years old. And so when I think back to my mother, I just think back, I don't know, I've said it to her, I don't know how you did it, Mom. Thank you. Thank you for having food on the table and doing what it took. She's a very strong, very stoic woman back then. And so I learned really quickly how to survive and how to navigate life and how to pay attention, because this culture, K through 12 education, our educational system, the cultural conditioning that we receive as young boys, as young men, and then just the toxic way that education can be, and we can get into that too, but education itself can be really harmful to all people, but to young boys in particular, in terms of our energy and our intrinsic ways of being in the world. So that young part of me learned that quickly, that you were shamed, you were punished and disciplined to behave and to follow the rules of the matrix, of the powers. And so I can tell you, I remember that early on. And I remember early on, almost from the age of 2, that I was a rule breaker. So I did not I felt too confined by what rules were. And I would figure out as good ways around them. And that included in education. And that's where a lot of teachers can be harmful to kids growing up in the educational system, especially a young boy that he's learning at home, but there's not that constant presence. And so a lot of how I learned was through being disciplined, shamed, punished, growing up. So, and a funny story is, I remember walking home from my mother at like 2, 3 years old from the daycare center. And on the way home, I wanted this ball that I saw in a yard, probably a good half-mile from our home. And in the middle of the night, I got up and I went right out the front door at 2 years old, 3 years old, after that ball, and went and got it. I remember climbing up over the fence, and the police actually brought me home, at 2 years old. So that young boy actually, when my mother remarried when I was about 8 years old, my stepfather put me into wrestling, and I took off with that and went to a very, very high level university scholarship, and ended up an All-American. These are US terms, but a very high level athlete that got me into college and university. So.
Oh, this is exciting. I'm keen to open up what you said about that the education system is damaging to children, but you said particularly boys. Why is that?
I think a lot has changed, but for me in particular, the idea that we would be confined to a desk and to be disciplined anytime we get out and live more inherently in our truth and in our power and who we are, right? We're free. Essence is freedom. And so very early on, we learn to be subservient. We learn to hide. We learn that if you are real and you break the rules, there'll be significant consequences. Now there's consequences for women doing that too. They're different and the same, right? And so part of what happens, and like I did a whole psychoanalysis, and as I was reconstructing myself in my 20s, I had to go back through each teacher, and pretty much there were a couple that really empowered me to be in my truth and in my authenticity, and knew how to work with me. But the majority of them were really harmful. And now that's not to say my wife is a teacher. She's extraordinary. I would have loved to have been in your classroom in middle school at 14. But just loving and kind and still teaching the content, but not in a punitive way,
Yeah.
So education is a lot different than I ever thought it was growing up. I have a PhD in education and a doctorate in it. And so I studied it. And when I was doing my doctorate, I actually walked into my mentor's office, and I quit. I said, I now recognize what higher education is, what K through 12 education is, right? It's building, I don't want to be too negative, but basically it's building a bunch of slaves who will enter the job market and who will do things that really are meaningful and purposeful, but it serves some larger force, a larger power. And my doctorate really examined that. It examined professional identity, who we become when we're internalizing these credentials. So that's what I'm talking about, is it can be really, really harmful. And a lot of my doctorate and a lot of my master's, because I did a master's in education and student development, student psychosocial, spiritual development, examined the forces that created these professional identities, right?
Yeah, this is fascinating, Matt. Thank you. So you've got 2 male children, let's say. I know you've got 5 children, but let's focus on the boys. How old are they now?
I've got a 23-year-old son and an 18-year-old son.
Okay, so they finished their schooling. How did you put them through schooling? What did these insights from your childhood and education, did you change anything when putting your own sons through schooling?
I'd say yes and no.
Okay.
That deep socialization, it gets wired into the nervous system and it gets felt as who you are, like an identity. And so dismantling that and examining the different beliefs and the ways that I internalize the beliefs, that took time. And so what I would say to my son, it's more important to know your truth. It's more important that you figure out who you are. And the age difference between 3 and 18 gave me some time, because that was my oldest, to navigate the educational system with him first. And so the way that I parented him consciously through that was, you're going to need to play the game. You're going to need these grades. And if you want to work and have a certain type of professional career, education is the path. Now, as an entrepreneur today, I don't believe that completely. I told my son, if I could change one thing, I'd give you all of the money I saved for your college education, and I'd put you with a mentor and a coach. And that I believe that is the pathway. That's been my pathway. I quit my job working as a director and kind of as a professor, teacher, director. So as I was saying, with my 18-year-old, I have to interact with his mother too. And she really took her education seriously. Getting grades was really important to her. Doing her best and working really hard and disciplined is how she got attention, and especially from her father. And so as we got married and started interacting in education together, there's me who's like, do what you got to do, but be you. Understand what education is. Play the game, but it is not who you are. Right. That's the most important fact. That's the most important aspect of life.
Yes.
And together, this idea of grades, it's really challenging, because he's right at the level of applying to university. My daughter Annabelle is also applied to university, and so letting them know that that's not who you are. And actually who you are is pretty, I talk to my wife all the time, Larissa, he's going to be fine. I can already tell you, he's got mad skills when it comes to communication. People like him. He's caring, he's kind. And this masculinity thing, we'll continue to work with him on. So I'm in his life. So this is my gift son, right? So
yes,
letting him know that there are rites of passage into manhood, and that he's right there at one of them at 18 years old, about to leave home.
yes.
And that I want to make sure that I talk directly to him about what it means to be a man. And to me, and I know this question is going to come up, but what it means to be a man is to do everything it takes to get back to who you were before the conditioning, everything it takes to address the ancestral DNA, these beautiful ancestors that are right behind us, on asking us to do the work that some of them could not do for themselves. So I know that when I'm doing this work, I'm doing it for my son. Up and healing those aspects of me that need that attention is something I'm teaching my sons. I don't want to leave my daughters out, but these boys, these young men, have been harmed in this culture, especially in the US culture, especially in a warring nation that at the same time, they're cutting the legs off and asking them to be someone that they may not be. I believe inherently we're kings and warriors, the masculine archetype. I believe every boy has a potential to be that. And so modeling that type of leadership on the planet for them. And my kids are like into their friends now, they love me, but they care about their friendships and what they're doing. And so what I thought about, what a way that I can be in their life is to be so loud about my offering, my world service, this leadership that I want to bring to the world, that they have to see their dad. Because you can imagine, I start talking to them about waking up and healing up and, cosmic leadership. They're like, Dad, that's enough. But sometimes they really listen,
Yeah. I have a 23 and a 21-year-old boys, so I get it. And that's coming from mum, but even more dad. I love what you said about what does it mean to be a man? And you touched on it, but I think this is a really important subject to maybe expand on. Can you give us maybe 3 qualities and expand on them a little about what it means to be a man?
One of the qualities is it's like my company came to me in meditation. It's freedom's edge. A quality of a man that I think is inherent is he'll go to the edge for his truth. He will go to the razor's edge to find his purpose. And that it's in there. And we haven't talked a lot about this, but I think that there's a quality of a man that needs to provide a sense of stability and sturdiness and presence to the feminine. And I don't think we do a very good job teaching that to our young boys, that in the coaching world and in the mentoring world, we talk about sacred masculinity and sacred femininity, divine masculinity, divine femininity. And that is a level of awakening and a level of initiation that is missing. And so part of what I think it means to be a man is there's an acknowledgement and there's a reverence and there's an essential reclamation. There's an essential reclamation of your truth. And for me, it was over the course of several progressive initiations. We are never done. And so part of mine was hurt, initiated through loss and grief. The loss of a love, your first love, a divorce, broke me. I fell to my knees. I couldn't even get up when I walked in to my home without my children for the first time. I loved my children. I never wanted to be apart from my children. And so what does it mean to be a man? It means you feel everything. It means that the sacred masculine and so my teachers, Sachan, my teacher, his teacher, David Data. So I want to acknowledge him because it was in his teaching, in his living room with his wife that I learned about the sacred masculine. I was figuring it out through life, through living life one day at a time, figuring out what it meant to be a man living in his purpose, committed. But the idea that freedom is a man's essence, that is the masculine essence, freedom. So I'd say, what does it mean to be a man? Freedom, like not the kind of bullshit freedom we're taught. That I do have the choice. I can go right now. I can get off of this podcast with you. I can turn it off and I can go to bed. I'm talking about like capital F freedom, all into life, all into what I am as a being on this planet, and stopping at nothing from milking it and living it. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary to touch the essence and truth of who you are. And most men are not living there. There are a lot of teachers that are mentoring that are not living there. They're teaching some good stuff, but I'm talking about the tantric, all in, letting death come and letting myself be annihilated for love. Letting my heart be your heart warrior, break mine. It's been broken. I love so deeply now, more than I ever could have fathomed. My heart is wide open. So what does it mean to be a man? To me, It's way more than being born a biological man. It's the essence of who we are. It's the way the universe, in this beautiful way, moves the energy through us, through the masculine, through a male body, through testosterone. And you can probably see it right now. When it is moving through me, I feel alive, and I want more. And I want more men to have it, because also means that I can hold present, to get into what it means to be a man. It's this Metatron, like the archangel of presence, like to be in it with Archangel Metatron. And I didn't mean to get into angels today, but Metatron in my office, I have 2 homes. I have Metatron right behind me to remind me to be right with presence, to remind me that a man can explode his heart for humanity, can live wide open. And I was telling my son today, because we were talking about death, because a young girl died, in his high school. And I wanted to make sure that that was something that we talked about. And so that it can always, death is a part of reality. Have a relationship with it. If I died right now, I'd know I was right there living and giving my full, So the idea of presence, letting the divine, letting the universal energy, universal love move through me and into my action, into my leadership, and penetrating that. So that is a teaching that changed me forever, that I embodied. It just sunk right in. Freedom, presence, claim the reality, penetrate it into the world. And by the way, as a man, there is no better way to do that than with my sacred partner and my wife. And so I full out. There is no better feeling than claiming her, than providing that sacred marriage of the twin flame of the and penetrating with fullness. And she wants it. She wants the fullness of me. So
Beautiful, Matt. Great. Well, we got a lot to go on from that. First of all, I'd like to get your definitions of sacred masculine and divine masculinity. Like, what are these terms that so many of us throw around and claim that, we give a definition to? What's your definition?
yeah, sacred masculinity, it's a lot about what I just talked about, but it's also embodied. So it's waking up to Shiva. It's waking up to the masculine energy. It's sacred because it is one of the beautiful energetic forces that moves through the cosmos. It's the weaver of reality. And so when I think about sacred masculinity and sacred femininity, the sacred masculinity is actually consciousness. It's the weaver. It's the one that's in the reality. Now we can bring freedom and presence and claim and penetrate. You can't do that unless you're right with the way reality wants to move, the way the divine, the universe wants to move. It wants to move free flowing through the human aggregate, through this male body. And so the way that universal energy moves through me, it's sacred as it finds its way in and finds expression through testosterone, through divine power. Like I can feel it in my voice. I can feel it in my tone. What is real, what wants to be born out of the unborn. And the divine feminine, it's such a gorgeous, I bow to the feminine. I worship the feminine. I have become a man that can do that. And I am in awe of the feminine. So the divine feminine to me is, it's everything that moves. It's all of the energy of love. It's expressive. It's I think surrender, I know that surrender falls into the feminine. I'm like, man, that's a masculine. That's one of those marriages, surrender. And so there's this beautiful power that the divine feminine has in the way in which the universe moves through her body and through her womb, and the way that the sacred masculine feminine is doing nothing but making love and creating. And we need both. And it is, I mean, I was going to say it's like fucking wide open. It's like there's nothing but constant eroticism, moving and creating and making love. And so to me, that's what the sacred masculine and feminine is when I start talking about it.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Could that, because not everyone's into these spiritual terms, I know a lot of men watching, I just try and give the whole broad spectrum. Could that be, could divine masculine and sacred masculine be interchanged with healthy masculinity? Someone who's
Yeah.
on their healing journey and embodying those higher truths, those higher values that you spoke of earlier.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. I think that I was a wellness director, so for the university, and so and resiliency and thriving, and so I connect what I'm talking about to thriving, to relationships thriving, to your physical health thriving,
Yes.
because you bring this notion of being present to your body and being present to your life. So many people, so many men, they go into the world of work and they work, and there is this innate intelligence right in us that I call it like work-life intelligence. And it's one of these places where you know that the time and the attention to the things that matter most to you, right? So part of what men need to do, and part of what I'm suggesting in terms of the sacred masculinity, is that it's that reclamation of your life. That world of work, that education told you that you needed to get a degree, that you needed to go to work, that you needed to provide for your family. Some of these things are beautiful, and that you are your career. There's a difference between kind of career and living in your purpose and your truth. And so, yes, part of it is a healthy return. Waking up is waking up to that, and a healthy return to who you are versus what you were told to be.
Right. Beautifully expressed, Matt. Thank you. Let's go back to that rock bottom moment you spoke of when you walked in the door after your or during your divorce without your children. Now, a lot of men go through this. So I'd like you to, how did you start spiraling on up from that point?
So when I walked into my house, this new house, it was dark, and I walked in and my children weren't there, and I looked around and I literally fell to the ground, literally collapsed. And the tears and the grief was of a lifetime of loss. It wasn't just my marriage. It wasn't just this relationship. It was this knowingness that I got hit with every grief, that I had never completed the process. And it hit me so hard that I couldn't even breathe. I started to sob. And there was a part of me that tried to put myself back together. I was trying so desperately to grab parts of my identity, parts of that I could put myself back together, but there was no way to do it. It was the deepest, darkest moment, one of the deepest, darkest moments of my life, my existence. And while I was on the floor, it was like a divine voice said, it's time. It is time to surrender. And I just sat there and I cried and I grieved and I felt deep, deep hurt. My father, my mother, relationships, ancestors, grandparents I never had, and the loss of my mother and father from 17 years old. They were never around. And on that floor while I surrendered and gave up. It was such a beautiful moment because God was there, the divine was there and held me and taught me to hold myself. And as I started to take my first step from the floor, after about 30 minutes of being on the floor, completely surrendered, giving up, I quit. And I just I can feel it now. I decided that I was going to choose my life, that I was going to choose consciously the kind of man that I wanted to be on this planet, the kind of father that I wanted to be, the kind of partner that I wanted to be, that I would no longer abandon myself. I would not project my grief and my hurt onto the women in my life, onto my children, and that I would stop narrating and projecting stories that weren't real, coming from trauma, that were coming from my conditioning, that were coming from defending my shame. And so as I started to move myself up, there was an awakening. And there was a healing that started, a lot of right there on the floor, maybe 1,000 years of grief coming through my system and through my tears. And I made decisions in that moment that I was going to be a conscious father, that I was going to be a conscious lover, that I was going to be a conscious lover of who I am, and that I was, and a lot of changes and transmutations that happened in that moment that I didn't even understand until I got up and started to move into the world. But it was something much different. A much different woman started to appear in my life. A truth and an honesty and an intimacy within relationships emerged. A deep vulnerability emerged. And as time and the years went on, a sturdiness and a power, I say sturdiness, a real straight spine, a real sturdiness, an understanding of what I was carrying, and a knowledge that I am a conscious being with choice. That's how I started to create a new life from that moment.
Thank you for sharing that, Matt. Can you please speak directly to any men who at the moment are at that rock bottom moment or still trying to, pick themselves up off the floor? What are you going to say to those men?
You're not alone. This place you're in right now, while it may hurt, and there may be frustration, and there may be grief, and there may be dark times, you're still there. And there's still a great opportunity to become the fullness of who you were intended to be. But it's a choice. So I'd say, brothers, there is always a choice for something new and something different. And if you're at the rock bottom, if you're like me, it's a moment that you can surrender deeply to those parts of yourself that no longer serve you. And I can tell you, men, that when I was able to see how long I was living in the false self and what I was not, to allow that part of me to die, that rock bottom was death. It was death it was excruciatingly painful to say goodbye to that part of myself that wasn't even really who I am. And so to you guys that may be struggling in life with some of these questions regarding parenting, regarding professional, regarding business, regarding love, just know that there's a deeper truth inside of you. And I'm living proof. I'm living proof.
How does a man connect to that deeper truth if hasn't found it yet?
Well, I would say, for me, I didn't just wake up on some happy day. And so it was kind of a moment of deep grief and deep pain. So how does a man connect? he connects to his heart, you know? And so a lot of times when I'm talking to a man, tell me where it hurts. Tell me what you want me to know about you. Tell me about yourself as a father. Tell me an experience that you've had that you felt like broke you. You know, so being really inquisitive to get them to think and reflect and contemplate on who they are. Not enough people do that. You know, so that's an easy road. One of the other places I like to take men is right into nature and offer them the beautiful gift of the woods or the forest or the ocean or the rivers. That's a beautiful facilitator of heart opening.
Yes.
And then beyond that, there's just so many. I just came out of the desert, you know, and on the trail. And every single time I walk into the woods, my heart opens.
Yeah, beautiful. You touched on death, and I'm interested to hear your understanding of what death is.
It's interesting. It's interesting that death and life, I feel, are the same thing. And so death is this reality that we all encounter. And I think Buddhism. And the idea is that we're all going to encounter kind of the ending of this physical incarnation. And as an esoteric healer, you know, I've trained for many, many years in energy, medicine. The majority of the constitution of being this is actually not in this physical body. It's in the 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th chakra up to the divine spark, where the cosmic masters and the ancestors and our guides and angels exist. And there's these beautiful permanent atoms that are the storage house of our incarnations. And so it's really clear to me as I touch my many lifetimes how illusory death really is. And the more that I cultivate an understanding, and probably my most profound experiences of death are in those moments of deep grief, of shedding and molting, the energy held in the mental body, the emotional body, the physical bodies, and also just some of the plant medicine, some of the beautiful plant medicine that will take you there almost instantly. And so to experience a complete death of the ego, this construct that we use to navigate reality, that helps us move in reality. The problem is that we've mistaken it for who we are. And so to return to the capital F, like we are way beyond, I call it kind of these personal identities we have on this earth, they're all constructs. They're not who we really are. And so to wake up to that is to bring death, to let things molt and melt and alchemize. And that it's in dying, you know, I love some of our spiritual teachers that have come before us, in dying that we actually are born to heaven on earth. You can actually live in heaven on earth in this unborn, beautiful life. So I know I might not be explaining it, but death to me is an illusion. And I know that because I've gone and teetered and played and welcomed it and allowed it to make its presence known in my life. And in death, there's life. I feel so much aliveness, the universe moving, energy moving through me. And I don't know, unless you go there, you know, deeply go to that place and recognize that there's a new humanity there. We don't teach this enough. I feel like I have a really beautiful, healthy relationship with death. And if I were to physically die right now, did I give my gift? Did I pour my offerings into this world? And in that, I feel so alive. And I want to step to death. I want to step to death, right to it, and say, I fucking did it. I dropped on this planet and I went all out, 1% for love. I let my heart open wide for my wife, for my children, for the animals, for the planet, for the masculine, for the feminine. And I let everything that wasn't the truth of who I die at the altar.
Yes.
Moment by moment.
Beautiful, Matt. Now, when you mentioned heaven on earth, I get what you mean, but maybe some people watching are thinking,
Yeah.
it feels more like hell to me. So is heaven on earth a place we go, or is it what we become? Can you, for people who maybe are thinking, well, feels more like hell to me, can you explain where this heaven on earth is?
Yeah, I had to throw that term out there. But the idea to me that heaven is the bliss of living completely free and embodying it on earth in a material body. So Nisargadatta, one of the famous yogis, he wrote a book called I Am That. I am that I am. That's where I feel. So to break that down, and to talk to my brothers and to talk to anyone who wants to feel what that feels like, I am that. I am all that is. You do the work of waking up and healing up those parts of you. And I'd say, God, some people can feel really happy with material reality. And heaven on earth to me is bringing down, embodying the truth, the universal energy, universal love right through your body and putting it on the ground and falling in love with life. To me, that's what I'm talking about. And if you're not in love with life, and I'm not talking about just happy, joyous, and free love, I'm talking about, you want to go to shame? It makes me feel alive. You want to go to grief? It makes me feel alive. And I now know I need to feel every bit of grief. And that's the stages of grief. That's denial, and that's depression, and that's sadness, and ultimately coming to acceptance of life. Like, I can't change. I truly cannot change my traumas and the ways they wired into my nervous system. But I'll tell you what, it feels extraordinary to know that I could get to them. And that's what I do for a living. I take people right to Freedom's Edge. Is about going right to every spot in your energy field and in your nervous system and in your body that's in there, keeping you from the fullest expression of love, from the fullest expression, if you're a man, of your masculinity, of being present, claiming your reality, penetrating into the world. That's heaven on earth to me. Heaven on earth to me is I can take it right to my wife, erotically, erotic intelligence, erotic freedom. Oh my God, that was one of the last steps when I was like, I've got this. I've got it. I've awakened, I've healed, and then I met Jaya of Erotic Blueprints, and I realized that there was still work to be done for my freedom. Like, am I telling my truth? Am I really claiming my truth? Because when I talk about heaven on earth, I'm telling you what, there is nothing like being in your truth and giving it and offering it to a woman. In my case, as a hetero man that wants to be in a committed relationship. And she would tell you, I've got her. She would tell you she is a well-loved woman and lots of things. And I've got her. I've got her. And I love heaven on earth. I love to experience a woman, a divine feminine woman pouring it on me. I get to experience, like when I think about it, I wake up as a king. You should see how I wake up every day, right? Heaven on earth, I wake up every day with a woman who has done her internal work, who knows she's a radiant queen and empress and a warrior goddess and loves the heaven. And she delivers it and brings it to me. And I just want more men to do that internal work so they can be receptive. They can receive. They can penetrate the feminine. They can offer. They can claim and penetrate with the fullest expression of who they are. So that's what heaven on earth means to me. It's a glorious way. And let me tell you, when you're telling the truth to your partner, to your woman, to your sacred partner, that is one of the deepest things I'm still learning. How do I say this impeccably? There's conflict. How do I not back away from or abandon my truth, but deliver it in a way that's honoring and respects her? And how do I receive her feelings compassionately or in a way, right? I can hold the feminine. I can hold it. It's not easy all the time, but I take no greater responsibility than that, being able to hold the feminine and everything that a woman stands for.
Beautifully articulated, Matt. Let's get into shame. You've mentioned it a few times, and I do know, on the Hawkins scale of consciousness, it's the lowest frequency, and a lot of our men are stuck in shame about their past, and unable to move on. And it is a huge hurdle to get over. What do you say to those men who have still got regrets and shame about the past?
Yeah. The wounds that are very deliberately directed at us as men, they weave themselves deeply into our nervous systems, into our minds. The subconscious mind is always paying attention, and it's always recording those places where you're shamed and humiliated. Shame is the most painful way of being seen. It's a belief that you are wrong. It's a feeling of not being enough, and it is delivered to men, to human beings, but to men as we put them into a hierarchy within a framework and a model that serves a certain power base. So I would say to my men, my brothers, wake up to that's in you now. And the hero's journey, where you step away from that and you take a look at where you were hurt. First of all, a lot of men repress it. They're taught to feel anything, right? There's more acceptance of men feeling their feelings, and they're encouraged a little bit more than in the past. Not when I was growing up, right? So, but I would say to men, don't do it alone. Get a mentor, get a therapist. I'm a therapist, I'm a mentor, I'm a coach, and I have had so many men in my life who have stood by me as I felt the fullness of shame. And I still remember, I don't know if it was Satyan, but basically saying, I'll go there with you. I've said that to so many men. Coming out of shame is one hell of a journey. When shame is one of the controlling mechanisms on the planet. Oh, if you want to control a man, shame him. You want to control a man, hurt him right in his identity, hurt him right in his masculinity, and he'll hide. And sometimes he will hide and do really well in business and do really well in a career and never experience what it feels like to release it, to love himself through it. And so, but what I'd say is that there is a way out. There is a way out of it. But first you have to recognize that it's a part of your life. And usually shame shows up in not reaching your full potential. Usually shame shows up in your relationships, feeling inadequate, feeling like you're not enough, feeling fear. I can't believe how many men are insecure, men in really top level positions, feeling insecure and lack of confidence and lack of readiness in who they are. And if you drill in, it usually doesn't take me very long to drill in to find those vulnerable, sensitive parts, shame, trauma, hurt. I usually ask men, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? I don't want to spend a lot of time in this. I want to go right to the depths of where you hurt and start to excavate and get it off and out and breathing. So that's kind of what I would say to a man. Shame is its basic definition is being powerfully seen. If you ever watch a baby, if you look at a baby, it will lower its head. It will put its head down when it's seen. And so it's in us. There is a real part of us that doesn't always want to be seen. And it's just such an interesting phenomenon. But I went there. I went there with every area I could possibly think of that might still be in my nervous system, where I'm not telling the truth, where I'm being dishonest, where I'm bullshitting myself, where I'm lying. And I think sexuality is a big one, where men are not telling their truth about their sexuality. Men are not telling their truth completely about how they feel. Men have repressed. Men are getting sick. They're more depressed than they've ever been on the planet. There's something wrong here. So
yeah,
that's one of the biggest things I do, with men as we go right to the deepest wounds.
Yeah, I love that explanation of shame. Thank you, Matt. So we've got about half an hour left. With all your experience personally and professionally, what needs to be brought into this conversation around man masculinity, the healing journey?
Radically, I think this idea that it's amazing how long I lived in my life and I thought that I was free and I wasn't.
Mm.
And so, Satchian would always say, to the extent that you're not living your truth and offering it is like a poison drop to the soul. And that touched me. And so part of what I think that doesn't get talked about enough is the extent to which men, human beings, but we could talk about men, are living in prisons. And I've always found it challenging to say that out loud to a guy who's a millionaire in a high stage, maybe in a marriage, maybe has kids, and on the surface really looks successful. Mm-hmm. But I have coached venture capitalists. I have coached multi-million-dollar people who on the surface within our system look successful and are not happy. And their wives and partners are not happy. And their children are not happy. And so that's part of what I was thinking about this. That's part of what just kind of doesn't get enough attention. This idea that on the surface, there's a lot of men that look really successful, that are kicking ass on the planet, that are doing, good things. But where are those transcendent leaders? Where are those leaders that have woken up? I've not found a man in my work who wakes up and heals up and matures up, that doesn't want to show up and change the world. And I believe that there's a new man evolving, a new type of a king that is evolving towards a new consciousness and a new truth for humanity. I was watching some of the other Heart Warrior and and um and picking up on that. I'm like, okay, there's some real similarities coming from the guys you're interviewing. I'm like, okay, I am one of these guys. I can see why you're interviewing them. And you've got a couple of my peers, and Satyan was my mentor, still is.
He's number
And
4 Heart Warrior.
yes, well, he is a warrior sage, and I'm so grateful that I was brought to uh, Ixtalan, his training facility, and that I went through the accelerated evolution program, and so is my wife, and we're together, sacred partners, rolling up our sleeves and doing this work together. So that was my next point. Is I really believe I'm building a company now with my wife called Relationships Thrive. And what happens when two people wake up, and two people who believe that they are sacred partners roll up their sleeves and move? I was already there when I met Larissa, my wife, the idea of this isn't just about me anymore. This isn't just about the we and the need for a new type of humanity, but it's the power of sacred partners coming together, producing. So it's one thing to be a leader and to be bringing this new consciousness to the planet. It's another thing to do it with your partner. It's another thing to be parenting, leading your children into a new and evolutionary consciousness. It's where we're at. It's really clear as the divine feminine reemerges. She's always been there, but as she comes back in, as that energy comes back in and partners with the sacred masculine, a new planet can be born. This is kind of where I'm at. I'm like, all right, let me loose. I'm going to write about it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to write poetry. I love your poetry. I want to write more like you do and offer that. I want to turn the video camera on more and talk about this to our people. So those are the things that I think are not getting enough attention. And by the way, I think most people want sacred partnership. I think people yearn for it. So when I was talking about the man that I am now, the man that I was 10 years ago would have never been for Larissa, my wife.
Yes.
An awakened woman, deep, wide open heart, living in her truth. Of course, she's got her wounds and got her earthly issues. But I really believe it's like one of the most extraordinary experiences to have is in relationship. And I love it. Today, it's so good. And I can't tell you the amount of time, thousands of hours. I wrote that piece that you connected with me after I wrote the piece that she trusts me. And what it took to become the man that could earn the trust of the feminine, where she would rest and relax in my presence. And sometimes when I'm talking about this, I want to just invite humility in, because I'm not trying to be arrogant here. I'm saying that I fully embrace and own my responsibility in the masculine as a man. So be the man. I want more men, my brothers. I want you to feel what it feels like to be the man, this man. I think that freedom is the new wealth for the planet. I think it is the wealth. And to feel what it feels like. And I'm still ironing this out, and I would love to hear your perspective about these initiatory stages into higher levels of freedom, higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of being, to occupy the frequency and the power of this level of freedom. It is something else when it comes through me and moves through me, to let it become part of my body, embody it, and move it through my language, through transmission. I'm in a place now where I'm like, just come sit with me. Come sit with me in my energy. And so that's what I thought about with this question, that we don't talk enough about the prison. And I know that a lot of people have talked about the matrix and the work that they've done to view the matrix. And when it comes to your mission and heart warriors and men dropping in to their hearts, I don't think we talk enough about dropping into your cock. Like the book Pussy, An Essential Reclamation. Have you read that?
I've got it. I haven't finished reading it. I think I read the first chapter. So many books I haven't read. I just do it by osmosis. So it's in here somewhere. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Well, my wife read it and she said, you should read this. So I read it and then I read it again. And I'm like, every man should read this to understand what women go through on this planet and what it's like to go through that reclamation process of the self for a woman and what she's been through collectively, the collective feminine wound. And that hurts my heart. And not on my watch, not with my daughters. And I know that they are experiencing some of this oppressive, some of how we define beauty, some of how we constrict the feminine. I'm like, no way. And so now I'm just looking at how do we talk about this? Because I want more men in their balls, in their cock. So where is the cock, the essential reclamation? Who's going to write that book? And so that's on my radar. I want to talk more about men aligning their hearts with their cocks, aligning that sacral chakra of the masculine penetrative cock. And I'm not talking about the physical cock. I'm talking about the energy of what it means to be a man present, claiming and penetrating his reality into the world. That's what I teach. That's what I want for my brothers. And it is so loving. When a man is there in his divine essence, it is the safest place for the feminine. And if and when, not if, but when more of us start to initiate our brothers and initiate our sons and grandfathers initiating their grandchildren and men taking responsibility for this, I just want to say that to the guys listening. Take responsibility for your waking up process. Take the responsibility. If you're hurting, it's a place where you're hurt. It's an awakening. And I'm telling you that the hurt, when the heart is open and it becomes less about you and more about we, and then about the world, and then about the cosmos, there's no better way to bring your energy onto this planet and to transition humanity to something new, something different. It's hard to explain this, but we are moving. We are evolving and moving to this. And there have been other times in human history where we've fallen apart and rebuilt. But I really believe in my heart warrior. I believe in my heart that we can build something more humane, that we can build something more loving. And in terms of my gene key, universal love runs right through my activation sequence. And I know what it feels like to bring that kind of love to the planet. And so that's one area too, that this notion of sacred sexuality, we don't talk enough about with men. And that's why I really love that I had the opportunity to do some of this with Satyan and then with Jaya and become a licensed kind of erotic blueprint coach. But I have to tell you that the learning and the freedom that came from learning how I'm built for pleasure and the ways that I want to experience pleasure and to go to the edge of truth about that, it's another level of freedom that I didn't even know existed. And then to normalize it and to move with it, to make love to life. And that's a place where that I found almost every man that I've worked with has some kind of trauma, some kind of conditioning, some kind of pain around expressing, because we don't teach it.
Well, they learn it from porn.
They learn it from porn and they begin numbing their pain that way. And they have the younger guys, they have a distorted view of sexuality, a distorted view of what love is and what pleasure is. And I want to help with that too.
Can you summarize it here? Let's start with, if they do have a distorted view, what are you going to say to them to give them some start untangling that distortion? Just, a couple of hard truths that, might start that untangling for them.
Yes. I would say that gets tangled through the eyes, and that pleasure is taught that it's an external thing, and that gets built into the nervous system, and now conditioning your reality, your sexual reality, on a screen. And that a lot of these young men then start to compare themselves to what they're seeing, which is in a lot of ways unnatural. And so that's part of it. And part of it for me is been talking with my sons about this. Now it makes it a very uncomfortable, but as a conscious father, I want that to be part of the dialogue, that we are built primally for our sexuality, and that part of deep self-love is to go to that part of yourself and to get to know that part of yourself. So I really like the assessment that Jaya put together after 30 years of tantric study, of being able to assess. As I took it, 5 years ago, and found out that I assess and test as an energetic man. That most men are taught that the only way to be is sexual. The only way to really experience pleasure is sexual. So part of untangling it is showing them and teaching them that we are multidimensional. Energetic, I'm also sensual. I have a very strong sexual. I have, there's a kinky, dark and light kinky. And then there's a shapeshifter. So just learning the language of your sexuality and knowing that there is so much more than what they're picking up. And the other problem is that we're not teaching kids this stuff. Parents, I was talking to my wife and I'm like, why isn't it okay that there's loud sounds coming out of the bedroom, right? Where kids know that parents love each other and are passionate about each other. And that discussion happens. That discussion happens in this house. That love is okay. Sexuality, sex is a part of life. And it's a beautiful part of life. And what's on the screen more often than not is not the reality of life. So parents should be having talks with their children early in life and modeling healthy sexuality and modeling healthy affection, and not having it be some surprise that every young boy learns about when he finally stumbles on the internet to internet porn. And I know guys, I was just writing about, I was just creating my own, post about what a limp dick is. I can't believe the number of guys now who have conditioned their bodies around porn who are limp. They have disrupted their natural and their natural primal, sexual desire with pornography. And that's hard, just like any addiction and any numbing behavior. That's really hard to heal. So I got a 40-year-old friend, who's already on Viagra. And so that's part of the unraveling is, I think, men going to that place. And again, I wouldn't go alone. The way that gets wired in, the subconscious mind, the way the body starts to become conditioned to that is not a place to go alone. And as a therapist, there's a there's a decharging the nervous system. I help to facilitate the removal of charge. Charge is the energy of the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. Mostly in this life, the physical, emotional, mental bodies that record. And so.
Oh, great. Awesome. Thanks, Matt. You said that I loved what you said about the masculine, I don't know what word you used, but around freedom. Was it their major what's the word like? Sorry?
Essence.
Essence, yes. And I've always said this too. So I'm interested in what you say about what is the major feminine essence.
Yes. Well, of course, love.
Yes.
And of course, the feelings and the emotions and just the extraordinary heart, and just the beautiful, wild nature of feeling and emotions. I love my feminine. If you haven't seen it, right, you've seen it. Like, I love it. I love my feminine. I like to make love to my feminine inside of me with the masculine. That's like the real sacred marriage inside. So the feminine is radiant. I just happened, my wife, oh my God, she glows. You glow. I see your feminine. And in your writing, I can see your feminine. And I can see your longing and your yearning. And it's this beautiful feeling that we get to have as human beings. And so for me, it's, again, I was taught this, but I really believe in it now, that the feminine is love, it's flow, it's the way energy moves, and the masculine is the weaver and marries it and starts to craft. But without the other, there is nothing new being created, right? So the feminine is that wild energy, that flowing energy. I love the metaphor of the river, and that it's the flowing water, and the masculine holds the river as it flows. And to me, it's, I take the responsibility, because so many, my wife included, but so many women have taken on masculine qualities to cope and survive with life. And so a lot of times, and my wife teaches 150 students a day, she's got to control that classroom, the bank, the river bank, constantly creating that container. So the feminine is just gorgeous, sensual, gorgeous, energetic, flowing.
Oh my God, agrees. Yeah, so you said before about the beauty of conscious relationships to work these dynamics of the feminine and the masculine. But at the moment, I'm more interested in you explaining to men how that works within the individual. You touched on it now, but maybe not all men are in conscious relationships. So how does that union of these beautiful masculine energies of freedom and feminine energies of love, how do they unite within the individual man?
Yeah, to marry the two within. Yes. And so for men, I would say, just personally, my sadness, my anxiety, and in some cases in my life, some depression, were the result of not feeling the feminine, not feeling my feelings, being told that to feel is a sissy. As a young boy, if you cried, you were shamed, deeply shamed. And if you expressed any emotions, you were made to feel wrong. And that that for our men to claim that part of themselves as a healthy expression, right? That sadness comes from, anger comes from, violence comes from, Destructive behavior comes from a man who's not been taught or not allowed to feel the fullness of who he is. And so when I talk about that, I think it's also part of the journey for a man to come to recognize. So I'm just talking right to men, to feel fully, to feel everything fully without shame, and to do it with some of your brothers that have gone there before to help you feel it all. Go there and feel it all. And the masculine part is the part that is sturdy. There's a lot of good qualities that men already have that are just part of our primal nature. You know, we're built for protection. We're built to be warriors, and we're built to be lovers. And I think that's one of the neglected parts of the masculine archetype. And I love wielding love. But I'll tell you what, I feel my warrior energy is about as strong as it gets. Some of that is, I'm so grateful I found wrestling and athletics, but I'm now a warrior for humanity. So these parts of us that are already there that need to be teased out in a healthy way, there's a healthy warrior. There's a healthy masculinity that wants to protect and take care of his people. And right now I'm experimenting with the king in me, that stands very firm in my leadership for our people, that isn't impacted so much about what other people think, right? So you write something that's there to serve humanity, and now you've got the slew of people who are a bit asleep that are going to critique and judge. And I'm building that part because it doesn't matter. What matters is truth. What matters is full feeling. So the marriage is, I am so in love with my heart. I love the man that I am. I know that I'm the whole. I am the capital S self, but I love the way it feels inside me. And to feel it inside this body, to feel all of the emotions. I don't feel deep rage or anger anymore. I feel a concern, and I feel a warrior. And I know in a lot of the feminine work that's happening, a lot of the work with women, you hear this idea of sacred rage. Mine, I feel, is like a primal rage. Anytime a man is not fully expressed, living on the edge of his truth, bringing his full gifts to the world, to his family, to his wife, to the planet, to his career, it's like a poison drop to his soul. And I believe it fully that marriage is that guy marrying. It's the full masculine. If you see the star, it almost looks like the Star of David. It's where the masculine penetrates the feminine, and presence marries claim, or invitation marries claim, and surrender, or I have to make sure I get this right when I say that out loud. But presence meets invitation, her invitation.
Yeah.
Claim meets her surrender. Claim her surrender and penetrate her expression. So it's the way the feminine and masculine meet within and then in sacred partnership. Does that make sense?
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Matt. So, oh yes, so I'd like to clarify. I loved what you said about encouraging men to feel fully. Now, you know, you're Heart Warrior number 61. So there has been a lot of discussion about this. Some men claim that men should be more stoic. Some men say that men should only feel in private. Some are saying, you know, to be more open in public. I can't remember any actually saying that, but I'm just giving examples. Where do men find the balance between fully feeling and being stoic?
Mm-hmm.
And within the public and the private arena?
That's a great question. So what I'm doing right now is I'm occupying the seat. I'm occupying the steering wheel of me, and I'm actually dropping myself into these types of experience so that my commitment to my truth comes first, impeccably comes. And there's a level of safety that one needs to have as a warrior and as a king when it comes to delivering and moving with the truth of who you are and moving with the purpose of who you are. And so I don't think I would ever describe myself as stoic. I think I would describe myself as any room I walk into, you're going to know I was there. Any room I walk into, any meeting I leave, you're going to know my truth. And that's why I left my job, because most of the institutions that have been created are status quo. There are very few organizations, which is where we're putting all of our people. Let's wake up, people. So I will never negate how I feel. I will let it rip. I love the way energy moves through me. And I think every single man should learn how to do that for their own health and well-being. And so they can bring the full contribution they were intended to make to this planet. A lot of guys are going to die. They're going to actually physically die without offering their gifts to the world. That's not going to be me. And that's not going to be anyone who wants to work with me, because that's where we're going. We're going there. And I'll tell you, I have been in these rooms. I have been right with the divine, looking at the barrier. Oh, but you know what? Even right there, it's like, that's life. Everything about life is right here. And I appreciate it. And that little critter of yours is doing exactly what it was born to do. So this man right here believes that you need to be in your truth no matter where you're at. And I'm not so sure stoicism is a truth. I'm not so sure about that. That's all I can tell you about that. But for me, to say this again, if you're in life and you're out in the world, that's where truth needs to be. And I've not found people who have done this kind of work of waking up and healing up and maturing that inner child, those shadow parts that needs to be out, needs to be illuminated, and needs to be parented and loved deeply by your higher self, deeply by the divine. And when that integration happens, when that maturing process happens, hold on to your ass. I can't believe I'm 52. I feel like I'm just getting started. And I want to be healthy. You know, my teachers, we always focused on your body. Are you taking care of it? What are you eating? What's going into your body? Self-love, nutrition. You know, I'm doing a microbiome diet right now, resetting my entire gut for health. And movement. How am I moving my body? What am I doing to take care of it? Because in order to allow the truth to move through me, you got to be pretty healthy, or it will destroy you. Like, I've learned this now. This ascension is not easy on the body. And so to bring truth down in and to move through the body, and that's how I help guys titrate. It's okay, you're waking up. Let's not bite off too much. Let's go to your edge right here. Maybe that's just one thought changes. One belief gets looked at. And then, of course, Satchan taught me how to accelerate that with trauma releases and different. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, so different subconscious investigation. So, and I got carried away there, and I forgot the question.
That's so good. So he's still going on. There's someone out there. I don't know what it is. Maybe someone mowing the. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry about that. And where can people find you, Matt? And after that, I'm going to ask you to deliver a final message to men, please.
Yes. People can find me at matthelmcoaching.com. And on there is a way of setting up a discovery call with me. And if you want to talk with me and you want to work with me, that's the pathway. Relationshipsthrive.org is being built as we speak. That's for couples. That's for singles who want to do the work now, the heart work, the heartmate work, soulmate, heartmate. That's being built as I speak. So, and with that will come be the lover they crave, have the relationship you desire. So helping to build this new paradigm for relationships. That's what that whole company will be. My wife, Larissa, is a feminine embodiment coach, and she's a priestess. And so we're going to blend our work with the masculine and the feminine and do this high level teaching and healing work together. The podcast, I just got started. So the podcast is coming. It's going to be called Man Unleashed or Uncaged. You know, the idea of getting out of the prison. And so I would love to have you on there, Gemma. And I think that's it. That's it for right now.
Beautiful. Thanks, Matt. We'll drop all those links below in the YouTube description. So, final message to men. What are you going to say to those men that are, you know, on the journey, aware, but maybe struggling a little bit?
Yeah, I'd say in the awakening process, extraordinary is very close. So I've talked about being an extraordinary man. I don't want to leave the planet having not touched extraordinary, how not having become everything that I was capable of becoming in this lifetime. And so for men, the idea of freedom is an exquisite feeling, and learning how to be present, right? So just to bring that full circle, the last thing I want to say is freedom is the wealth. Truth, your truth is sexy. Believe me, I've talked to hundreds of women. A man's vulnerability and his truth is sexy. And so truth is the new sexy, freedom is the new wealth. These are things that I know now and I embody now because I've made the journey into what true freedom is and what it entails. So there's nothing like feeling and being present in your life. It's all we ever have. Claiming your reality, fully claiming your reality, and bringing the truth and penetrating the truth of who you are into the world. And the last thing I'll say is that the people closest to you get to receive that. So while I'm now moving it out into the world, I love that I get to be present and give my time and attention to my wife, my sacred partner. I love that I can give heart warrior. I love that I can give that warrior heart to my children, and that they can experience a conscious father who is trying to bring the best of who he is to fatherhood and to being a parent. And that from those people closest, which I know that's what matters, part of what I'm doing is bringing men to center their energy on what matters the most to them. And when I talk to men, when I really get to it, their purpose matters, their partners matter, love matters, their children matters, and they just struggle to keep that radical alignment with what matters most in their life. So beautiful. That's all I've got for you.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Matt. Well, very enlightening conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I want to thank you for your presence and wisdom, for being here. And thank you to everyone for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, and Matt will keep you on to get that title, please.
Yes, I want to say thank you to you and honor you, Gemma, for Heart Warriors, for the 100 interviews that you will complete as you create a new reality and participate in leading in the creation of a new reality for not only men, but for our planet. So deep bow to you, Reverend. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Bye, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow, next day, with another episode of Heart Warriors.